Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice-Hughes. Over the next hour, you'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hi, everybody. I am your host, Donna Rice-Hughes, and welcome to this week's episode. We have a really exciting show lined up with two top experts in online privacy. Today's topic is online privacy, dead or alive? Joining us today is Rick Lane, who is a tech policy expert, child safety advocate, and founder and CEO of Iggy Ventures. Rick served for 15 years as the senior vice president for 21st Century Fox, that was formerly known as News Corp. He was the director of congressional affairs for the United States Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you for having me, Donna.
Okay, great. And next we have Greg Rohde. He's an internationally recognized expert in the policy area of telecommunications and public safety. He founded eCopernicus to help tech companies grow. And thus far, he's raised over $500 million. Great job, Greg. He was the Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Administrator of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We'll make that really short, NTIA, because we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. And he was chair of the COPA Commission, and that's how we met when I served on the COPA Commission. He's also on our board, and welcome, Greg.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Great. All right, so, gentlemen, what is the state of online privacy? Is it really dead? Rick, first to you.
Well, privacy has always been problematic and complicated, so it's not dead. Congress has taken a very close look at legislation to have broadened the privacy laws here in the US, but that doesn't mean we don't have current privacy laws that protect certain types of information today.
Great, thank you. Greg, your thoughts on that?
Well, I see privacy as more of a challenge. We live in basically a surveillance economy now. For the last 20 years, we've seen a whole industry emerge that's been unregulated, also has a sweetheart liability deal under Section 230. And this is an economy, and these companies have grown into some of the largest companies in history, all based on the business model of extracting people's data and following what they do online. So privacy is something that we're all fighting for to try to claw back.
Right.
It's not dead, but it's a serious challenge to try to preserve it.
That's right. I want to come back to the history of privacy in the United States, because it is very interesting, and both of you all have been involved in it since the advent of the internet, as have I. I mean, we're all veterans, 30, 35 years when we first met. And so what is the history? So let's kind of track that. Rick, I'm going to go back to you and then to Greg, and then we're going to see where we are and how we're trying to fix it.
Sure. Back in 1973, the federal government came out with their Fair Information Practices and Principles. And that really was kind of the foundation of how the government would actually collect and use information. It had accountability, purpose, security, transparency, minimization. But that was really at the federal level and for the federal government, but not for companies themselves. They would try to have different rules for them, but nothing was really on the books. But what we've created over the years is more of a sectoral privacy regime, which means that we have a specific law on health information. So when you go to the doctors, you have to sign HIPAA releases. Mm-hmm. We have it in terms of financial information. Banks are regulated under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, and that's monitored and held and controlled by the Treasury Department. You have FERPA, which is when your kids go to school, and the privacy rules and laws around the collection and use of information, educational information, that's monitored and managed by the Department of Education. You have COPPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, that is monitored and managed by the Federal Trade Commission. And then one of my favorite, most interesting privacy laws is the Video Privacy Protection Act, which regulates the collection and use and transmission of information on your video rentals. And that came about during Judge Bork's nomination for the Supreme Court when an ambitious reporter from the Washington Post went to his local video store and asked the clerk for all his video rentals. That got members' attention and staff's attention. And so that legislation passed pretty quickly.
Right. Thank you. That was a lot. That was a whole lot in there. Greg, NTIA, you were obviously very involved with NTIA. What has been and is NTIA's role regarding online privacy?
Well, NTIA under the statute performs the role as the principal advisor to the president on telecommunications and information policy. So one of the hats that NTIA has, it's the policy branch of the executive within the executive policy agency within the executive branch. And so it advises on administration policy with respect to that. You know, Rick's description of the history of privacy was very good. You notice he didn't mention there's a general protection on individuals' privacy. When I think back of the history, I think back to the 1990s when I worked on the Telecommunications Act in 1996.
Right.
And at the time, Congress, I mean, the talk of the internet and the information age was all about promise. It was all about how the information age is going to bring in a new economy, how it was going to create more jobs, it was going to enhance education, it was going to basically solve everything. And so the laws that were established in 1996 were all established around the idea that the information age is going to bring all these tremendous benefits. There wasn't a lot of discussion about industries that would eventually emerge in social media that would then build their business on extracting people's data and using that data. And so that's where the big hole is right now in terms of privacy policy in the United States. Yes, like Rick said, we've got laws that protect our health information, laws that protect our banking information, the videos we watch, but we don't have a general law that protects us generally about our data, and our data is not ours. It's up for the grabs by any company that wants to make use of it and then turn around and use it to either manipulate us, sell us something, or whatever use they want to make of it.
I'm so glad you brought up the Telecommunications Act because all three of us were involved in that. And this was really about bringing the protections to protect children from online sexual exploitation. And we looked at child pornography. We looked at how do we guard kids from pornography? You know, how do we get these laws in the physical world extended to this new thing? It was called the internet, but in the law we called it a telecommunications device. And because it was all so brand new and it really was the wild, wild west. And as you brought that up, Greg, it just made me think about, we never did talk about privacy. We were talking about protecting kids from online exploitation. And now here, fast forward, Rick, you told me in a recent conversation yesterday, you said data collection is the oil of big tech. I just love it. That's like greasing the wheels. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, it's exactly what Greg was saying, that we are in a surveillance economy, and we are, as individuals, are not customers of these social networking sites. We're the products, and you've heard that many times over. And that's how they're making money off the eyeballs and the clicks. And so the better you're able to target an audience with advertising, the more money you can charge. And that's why these companies like Meta and Google and Amazon and Reddit are worth, billions and trillions of dollars, because of that sophistication in data collection, analysis, and the targeting of advertising.
Yeah, I mean, it really is still the wild, wild west, isn't it? And anytime, as we all know, 30 years in this battle, we start trying to rein in big tech, as I call it, we get a lot of backlash from these multi-billion-dollar companies that have really had an anything goes kind of a policy, and they have grown to be, mega giants. And some of their economies are their revenues are bigger than nations. So I'm going to just jump a little bit because we're going to come back to what we're doing and what Congress is doing later. But what is the intersection of privacy and child exploitation? Now enter AI, encryption, and all of this is around the collection of data. Rick, can you take that one first, and then we'll go to Greg?
Sure. It's going to be more scary with AI and data collection because you're going to be able to target as a predator online the individual attributes of young people and do it at massive scale and have that data to maybe look and sound like their friend. So you right now I'm talking to you, Donna, but in a year from now it could look like you, it sounds like you, it acts like you, but it's not you. And then I'm telling you things that I may not tell somebody else. And that's the future that we see. And all that is from the massive data collection. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we were concerned and Congress passed legislation on TikTok was the massive amount of data collection that they can do and manipulate that data to the harm of US national security. But then with our domestic companies, the harm to our children.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. And I'm, I've heard from so many grandparents. There's a great video out there now about AI and everything. And you see even now, and you hear these scams of a child that sounds like the grandparent's grandchild calling and crying for help and saying, Grandma, Granddad, send me money, and this whole thing. And many people have gotten caught up in this. We've gotten caught up in all kinds of scams. So, Greg, you're looking at this. You advise a lot of tech companies, and Rick, so do you. Uh, who is concerned about this besides parents and fighters like us and Congress? Is big tech concerned?
Yeah, everybody should be concerned. I mean, anybody who's been a parent. I have an 18-year-old, just started college this year. And so the last 18 years, I've watched this little guy grow up, and mobile devices have been part of his life since he was born. And he uses that. So anybody who's been a parent understands the power of these mobile devices and how much time kids spend on those devices. And very quickly you can get engaged, you can get very absorbed into whatever they're following. And so it's extremely dangerous, and bad actors there who want to identify young children who are not fully developed, that do not have the suspicions that adults have, do not have the experience to know that something might be good or bad. They can be preyed upon by individuals and companies that want to engage them, get their eyeball time, have them spend a lot of time in these devices. The other thing is we've seen from some of the whistleblower information that's come out of Meta, for example. By the way, the whistleblower information came from an SEC filing because there's no regulatory body to go to complain about these companies other than they lied to their shareholders. But we've seen information of companies like Meta who know full well their algorithms deliberately engage young kids to get them absorbed into their online personalities and cause serious mental health problems. So I think we ought to be very, very concerned, and children are especially vulnerable to getting sucked into scams and efforts to keep them engaged, because that's how companies make money, by having people engaged on websites for long periods of time.
Right.
And so it's a real struggle for parents to have to keep an eye on their kids because, as you said, this is the Wild West. They're not regulated. And on top of them not being regulated, they have a special liability protection that nobody else enjoys. So they can't be sued for what happens on the content of the website. I mean, if Fox News or the Washington Post or CNN produce information that they lie or they abuse their positions of authority in the media, they can be sued. But
Right.
if you're in social media, on internet platform, you can't be. You're protected from it. So
That's
it's
right.
it's a real struggle.
And that's certainly a big topic. We can spend a whole show on Communications Decency Act, Section 230, and we're still trying to unravel that now, or dismantle it, I should say, because it's been abused for years, and the intention of Congress was never for it to be used this way or abused this way. And so now pulling that back to where there is accountability, there is responsibility. It's taking, big tech is the big lobby on Capitol Hill. I mean, that is the lobby. The predators, the pornographers, the child pornographers, they don't have to be on Capitol Hill because big tech is carrying the water for them. Rick, you're working on a lot of these issues as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, looking back, I worked at the US Chamber, as you mentioned earlier, and we were strong supporters. I still am of the, self-regulatory side of the internet. But
Right.
what has happened is when we used to talk about self-regulation, it meant actually you regulated yourself. You took steps to protect your users. And so back in 96 and 98, when a lot of these discussions were happening, we really felt strongly that lets the businesses move more quickly than government can. But what we've seen over time is that companies like Meta had mottos of move fast and break things. And once you had that mindset, it really threw the self-regulatory environment that really came out of the Clinton administration out the window. And so you started seeing a movement. One interesting history about privacy is that we almost had broad privacy legislation back in 2000. And legislation was moving through the Commerce Committee, bipartisan legislation. You had the left and the right working together, Ed Markey, and other members on the Republican side. But what happened was 9/11. And 9/11, when people realized that there may be information that you want to gather to prevent another terrorist attack, privacy legislation fell away. And now we're starting that cycle back again, and we're getting closer.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk a little bit about the vulnerability of kids. Again, we talked about it a little bit, but we've got things like the ways kids are actually putting themselves at risk, right? They're putting too much information out there. They are sexting, which now when kids that are polled, teenagers, preteens, are considering sexting to be no big deal, just a rite of passage. Everybody's doing it. There is something that we call self-generated content, where kids are taking pictures, posting them of themselves in a sexually explicit or nude types of photographs that can get into the hands of anyone, a sextortionist, a predator, an abuser, or a trafficker. So when you add all these safety and privacy issues that we're talking about, and then how vulnerable kids who've gotten hooked on this technology and they're trying to keep up and look good and compete, and the girl's trying to get the attention of the guy, except the guy's not really the guy she thinks he is. He's, the sexual predator who's trying to groom her, or it's the sextortionist pretending to be, the cute guy who's actually now going to get that nude and say, if you don't give me $1,000, I'm going to put this all over the internet and call your parents. And then we've got suicides. I mean, it's a hot mess.
It's absolutely a hot mess. And Congress is trying to figure this all out. And there's such strong competing forces on both sides of this issue. It's hard for Congress to come to a conclusion. The one thing we have to realize, there's always going to be harm.
Yeah.
No bill's going to be perfect. No bill's going to clean all this up. But it takes all these different pieces. It takes education. The materials, Donna, that you put out are incredibly important for parents and kids to have. It takes legislation on Greg's point, to bring liability in the legal system to hold these companies accountable for the harm that they're creating to their users, especially their younger users. And it takes law enforcement and financial dollars to law enforcement, as well as survivor groups, to help ensure that these kids have access to protection because let's face it, sometimes the parents aren't great parents. And these kids who are most vulnerable to a lot of this are those who are homeless or LGBTQ and others, and they need help. And we need to make sure we have resources to help them on the ground, like the Covenant House and entities like that.
Yeah, you're right. Since we got in the battle, really, at the advent of the internet in '94, we were the first internet safety organization in the United States. And we've been touting this mantra, which is right now has been adopted really pretty much worldwide. And that is, it's a shared responsibility, Rick, just to sum up what you said. Parents have a role to play. We need to educate, equip, and empower them. That's what we do at Enough is Snuff. That's what this podcast and a radio show is all about. Then there's the role of corporate responsibility and accountability. And we found through the history now, it's been 30 years, big tech have had the opportunity to do the right thing and to self-govern, but they haven't, because it's been about the money, putting profits over safety. And then, of course, you've got the role of government, trying to keep up with new policy, and the policy that we do have, getting those laws aggressively enforced and funded. So I want to come to an article, Rick, you sent me this yesterday, actually, from the Wall Street Journal, and it said, wallets are over, your phone is your everything. And here I want to talk a little bit about what you call fintech, which means financial tech. I mean, how are we as adults vulnerable to all these things like these cash apps and digital currencies and Venmo and Alexa, all these things we're using? I mean, how are we putting ourselves at risk?
Well, first of all, digital apps are amazing. I mean, the convenience of being able to Venmo your friends and use these types of technologies is so much easier than writing a check, or your friend saying, "Oh, I paid you yesterday," and you said, "No, you didn't." With Venmo, you can say, "Look, you still haven't paid me." And so there's a lot of advantages to the technology, but there's also risk, especially with children, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, one of the laws is Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which is about financial services. That was written in 1999 when kids didn't have debit credit cards, let alone digital cards. And what is happening now is that these digital wallets allow, like Cash App and Venmo, these companies to collect all the transactions that these kids are making. So when I was younger, my parents would give me $10 and I wasn't tracked in how I spent that $10. But today, if you're using a digital wallet, besides one company, which again, full disclosure, I have an interest in, but you're tracked. Your financial transactions are tracked from the time you buy something with that digital wallet all the way through. And unfortunately, the law in that area was written for adults, not for the protections of kids. And one last thing is, that's how a lot of these transactions occur when a kid's getting sextorted. They'll say, Venmo me Bitcoin, because you can do Bitcoin on Venmo. Or there's all these other ways that they're transferring money that parents have no idea is happening, and that kids are exchanging dollars that may not be in the best interest of their mental health.
So thank you for that. Greg, first of all, comment on that, and how effective are these privacy policies? Every time we go online, we get a new product, we sign on to, a new download or a new app, or there's a privacy policies that are miles long. What do we need to be looking at? What is important? I mean, because it's really an opt-out system, I believe, right? They get everything unless you go in and you say, no, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this. So that puts a big burden on anyone using the technology or the app or whatever, in particular, the parent. And one of our safety tips is consider deleting a lot of the apps on your phone. And guess what I did last night at midnight? I deleted about 25 apps. So let's talk about because I didn't want to read all these privacy policies of apps I really don't even use that much. So Greg, how effective are these policies, and what do we need to be paying attention to?
Well, they're not effective, and hardly anybody ever reads them. And the terms of service that you go through, how many people will take the time to read all that fine detail? I'm getting old. I can't even read it with glasses on. So it's just it's hardly effective. But, this trend is going to continue. We can't fight the trend. I mean, just recently, we took a family vacation to Scandinavia this summer, and we spent plenty of time in Norway. I never, ever saw Norway currency, a coin or a dollar. Everything is either a card or it's off your phone. And in fact, you go into a store to buy, a tea or a coffee or a piece of fish or whatever you're buying. The first thing they want is for you to, pay by phone. If not, use the old-fashioned way, pay by a credit card. So this movement is happening. So and Rick made a good point about how a lot of these laws that govern the financial system have been written a long, long time ago. So there is a definite need for Congress to do catch up, to figure out ways in order to preserve privacy within this whole new world. But we can't fight the trend. The trend exists, and it's going to continue to exist. The other thing is we can't legislate our way out of this. A lot of these trends, they're very useful and very convenient. I mean, it's very convenient. Like I don't carry cash anymore in my pocket. I'm always either using my phone or using a credit card, and it's much more convenient that way, and it's good way for me to keep track of my own finances. But like Rick said, there can be times where, children get exploited. They can find themselves in very compromising situations. But there's only so much that we can do from the regulatory and legislative front. But still, when it comes down to children living in this new world, nothing substitutes for them having either parents or teachers or something in their lives that is educating them and making sure they understand these vulnerabilities. Organizations like EIE that provide great educational tools to be used, but somebody's got to be in the lives of these children to help them understand that, and nothing substitutes for that.
Well, you're absolutely right. We always say parents are the first line of defense. So thank you with that. And talking about convenience, I was stunned. I'm a Whole Foods shopper, but I haven't been in a while. And I went to pay with my credit card, but there were two little machines sitting there. And I said, which machine do I put my card in? They said, oh, this one. I said, oh, well, what's this one for? They go, oh, that's a hand scan. I said, are you kidding? They said, no, you just scan your hand. Right. Like, really? You scan your hand and your biometrics are now tied to your banking account and your credit card. Rick, that scared me.
Well, it shouldn't scare you. I mean, I was at the airport and I went into one of the Amazon shops, and you put your credit card, you scan your credit card as you walk in, and then you pick out what you want, and then you walk out and it tracks what you took with you out. So you need to go to a cash register. And so the technology, as Greg pointed out, that's incredibly convenient. It was a little weird first time, like how do they know it's me? And are other people using my credit card because they came at the same time I did? How it works is still amazing, but it does. And the biometrics is incredibly important. The only one issue with biometrics is what happens when someone sets up the account with their own biometrics, but with your name.
Right.
And so when they walk with the handprint or the retina scan, that somehow they're able, basically taking your biometric identity away from you. And those are some of the issues that will be becoming more and more prevalent.
Well, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit about that after we take a break. Some of the other areas like Clear at the airport that was with the retina scans. But more importantly, after the break, we're going to take a two-minute break here. We're going to come back and talk about solutions. What is government doing? What is Congress doing? What is big tech doing or not doing? What can they do? And then we're going to go right down step by step what you can do now as a parent to protect your children's privacy and your own. So thank you. Come back with us in 2 minutes and we'll be back with Greg and Rick. Hi, welcome back, everybody. I'm Donna Rice Hughes, your host of Internet Safety with me, Donna Rice Hughes. And we have with us Greg Rohde and Rick Lane, and we are talking about online privacy, dead or alive. We're going to pick up where we left off. And one problem we didn't talk about in the first segment that we're going to pick up now is identity theft. Ooh, who has had their identity stolen? Oh dear, my family just experienced this. So, Rick, you described different kinds of identity theft. What are they? Explain briefly.
Yeah, very quickly. Identity theft is when obviously someone steals your identity. The question is, how do they get the data? And that happens in a variety of ways. One, it could be a data breach. Your shopping app is hacked and all your information is lost. Health information has been hacked. We've seen a lot of these hacks. The other are phishing scams, which basically you think it's coming from someone it's your bank saying, oh, you need to update your account and your password, and you click on the link and it takes you somewhere else. And so those are the areas where most people lose their identity. Right.
And phishing, by the way, is not like fishing with a rod and reel. It's phishing. And I've been phished, and I'm supposedly an expert in this space. I'm like, how did I get bamboozled into this? Greg, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think pretty much everybody who has an email address and surfs a website has been, compromised in some fashion. I mean, it's unavoidable, and the bad actors are getting better and better about it all the time. I'll just give you an example how Within the last year, I set up a PayPal account because I do work internationally and make payments over to Europe, and it was an easy way to make, transfer payments using that. Well, right after I set up the PayPal account, I started getting these emails from a fake email address that posed as being PayPal, saying that somebody had tried to make a payment on cryptocurrency off my account. And I remember calling the number, and the first thing they say is, "Well, let's go to your computer and we'll help you fix it." Well, that's a dead giveaway. That's what that is. And so, one thing that I do to try to protect myself is when I set up accounts like that, I put it on that comes out of a credit card, not my bank account, because credit cards are pretty good at identifying fraud attempts, and they'll shut things down and contact you. You connect it to your bank account, you can have your whole bank account wiped out. And so I'd rather be dealing with a few $1,000s charge on my credit card and going to the bottom of that than having my whole bank account wiped out. So that's one of the things that I do is any of those accounts that I have, whether it be Venmo or PayPal or whatever, it comes off of a credit card that I find I have better protection.
Right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Like I said, we just had something recently, and we're still trying to get out of it, where my husband's email and computer was hacked. We think it was a phishing scheme, and they had gotten in, created an invoice, a fake invoice, and sent it to our accountants to pay these invoices. When the accountant said, "Hey, Jack, is this okay to pay?" the hacker said, "Oh, yeah." And boom, money starts flying. We're like, oh my goodness. So we got that shut down, thank God. But who would have thunk, right? And it happened to us. So, okay, solutions. What is the government doing? And Greg, you work a lot in Europe. How is European policy and EU policy impacting what's going on in the United States? That was a loaded question, okay, but I'm just going to throw it to you.
No, but it's a very good question. The simple answer is that they're way ahead. In the U.S., we do not have a data protection law. We do not, and so we do not have a regulatory structure to deal with on internet platforms, no matter what the issue is we're talking about, whether it's child exploitation, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, all that. We don't have that structure. Europe, little less than 10 years ago, established a GDPR, which is general data protection for Europeans, which has had a big impact on how companies can access people's data. The premise is that consumers own their own data, and they need to give permission for somebody else to take that data and use it. They also have the right to be forgotten. If they don't want to be tracked, they don't want to be followed, they have a right to be so-called right to be forgotten law. Also, more recently, the European Parliament, European Union has passed the GSA. The DSA, Digital Services Act. This is a new regulatory structure that online platforms have to live with in terms of content moderation and taking content down that might be true, not true, something that might be harmful. They have a whole structure. One of the things, I have a lot of friends who are lobbyists in the tech industry, and I know their marching orders is go to Congress and keep saying, don't regulate us, don't change anything, keep us unregulated. I keep telling them, as a result, you're going to be regulated by what Europe passes. And so I think it's imperative that our Congress and administration work diligently to figure out, what does that structure need to look like? It's untenable to have a situation where these massive platforms that are some of the largest companies, most powerful companies in the world, have absolutely no regulation whatsoever. There needs to be some kind of regulation of some sort and some kind of structure. If we don't do it, Europe has done it. And so we have California companies that are now living under a regulatory structure created by the Europeans, not by our own government. And I think they'd be well advised to work with our own government to create a structure that works for them, that works for their customers and their subscribers, and to find a pathway through this that finds a happy medium, not to simply have the extreme now of no regulation, no liability exposure at all.
You're exactly right, Greg. And so there are multiple bills that have been proposed in the Senate. Let me just say this. Protecting kids online, whether safety or privacy, is a nonpartisan issue that has wide bipartisan support. So that is a good thing. The trouble is these companies are fighting what we consider as experts in Congress that are working on both sides of this good policy. Rick, let's talk about just briefly COSA. I know it's not privacy, but it's safety, and then COPPA. Congress has now, or the Senate has passed a version of an attempt to upgrade COPPA 1, which was back in the 90s, to COPPA 2, but now we've got some problems with that. So why don't you run with that for just a few minutes?
So, so COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, is a conduct bill. And it gets to the point that Greg was just making, which was we have to be able to hold platforms accountable for how they're designing their products and services that can create harm. I cannot create a product in the physical world and say, well, I knew a child was going to be hurt by this product, but I did nothing to fix it. I can be held accountable for that. In the online world, if a platform designs a product that creates harm and they know it was going to create harm because of Section 230 and other protections, they cannot be held accountable. So right. Kids Online Safety Act is a conduct bill. And then we have COPPA, the Child Online Privacy Protection Act 2.0. That's the other bill that was combined with COSA in the Senate that basically was trying to update the privacy laws for 17 or 16 and younger. Right now, COPPA only applies to 12 and under. And so this was trying to add a few more years, but right. Unfortunately, they've missed the boat on this one.
That's right. And so just for parents who, we're all kind of policy wonks here, what that means is that it would extend the privacy protections that kids under 13 have under COPPA 1 to 17. And we liked it. We all liked it. And then some tweaks got made where they took away what we called verified parental consent for the 13 to 17-year-olds. And then they changed it at the last minute and they took out parental. So parents lost their rights here. And then teens are now able to give their permissions and privacy permissions. And in some ways, it makes it worse. So we're probably going to have to go back to bat on that. So parents are probably going, oh my gosh, you guys, I'm having trouble with all of this. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? We're going to talk about what it is that you need to do to protect your privacy, because where we are is Congress is trying to figure this out. And you can certainly support groups like ours. We're out there. We're talking to members of Congress. We're in big coalitions where we have broad support, and trying to get government to do the right thing to regulate these companies. But what do you do right now with the state of privacy and safety in the United States? Okay, so we're going to talk about some practical things. At internetsafety101.org, if you go to our cybersecurity section, you can just look at how do I protect my privacy. We're going to run through some of those with Rick and Greg and say what works and what's not working. One is use a VPN instead of public Wi-Fi and other ways to access the internet. So, Rick, what's a VPN?
VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. And how it works, so if let's say you're on the metro and you're using the Wi-Fi, or you're in a hotel and you're using the public Wi-Fi, that usually is unencrypted, which means that somebody could set up a system and read what you're transmitting, the emails you're sending, what you're what's going on between you and what you think is a private conversation. A VPN works in a way that encrypts that information. And so that even though you're using a private net or a public network, the information going back and forth cannot be seen by people you don't want to have seen it. And that's why it's good for privacy. So that way you're not just opening up your front door of your computer and allowing anybody in.
Is it easy to do? Is it easy to set up?
Yeah, they've made it really easy, actually. If most of the different softwares out there that are like Norton and others come with it, the VPN function, it turns on automatically. When you're on a unsecure Wi-Fi, something will pop up and say, this is unsecured. Do you want to turn your VPN on? And you click yes or no. So they've made it very, very simple.
Okay, great. We're going to go to the next. We're going to cover two really quick here. Block ads. Okay, who wants to see these ads anyway, honestly? And we know, how are these companies tracking us? They have collected so much data on us. They know everything about us, our household, and everything else. So, block ads. Good idea?
Absolutely, it is. But I think if other people are like me, when you see a pop-up come up and say, do you accept these cookies or not? Sometimes you're afraid if you say no, then you can't get access to the site. With that, but cybersecurity systems like Malwarebytes and Norton and others are getting better. And just the other day, I was on my computer at home and I actually was trying to click one spot on my computer, and I clicked the wrong spot, and I went to a website that suddenly was like, boom, 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 don't go here, and shut it down. So the thing is to have really good cyber protection on your computers and to follow those and keep those systems running. And when it tells you not to go somewhere, don't go there.
Don't go there. Okay, how about things like ditch Google and go with DuckDuckGo?
Yeah, I mean, DuckDuckGo has, a great advertisement about, not being tracked. Google has the same functions that you can turn, so you're not tracked. But again, gets back to what Greg was saying, the cookie question is different than the ad issue, because cookies are little pieces of code that track you. The ads are what pop up based on that tracking. And so one of the things that I think is going to be really important is getting away from targeted advertising and get back to contextual advertising. So if you're watching a sports show, then you get Dick's Sporting Goods store on it versus having targeted ad based on all the information that they've collected on you. And I think that's where most people are going to start heading.
Okay, good. All right. Here's a couple of other things. Empty the cookie jar. How often should we be doing that?
Yeah, on your browser, if you're using Chrome, there's ways to delete your browsing history, and it's not that hard. There's an icon for it, and you can look up on how to do it. But you can do that, and that's a great way to clear out all the cookies that you have and other types of tracking things that may be on your computer, and it allows you to basically to start from scratch. The good thing, it allows you to keep your passwords, which is nice, so you don't have to redo all your passwords again.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
But you can delete all those as well. Like if you got hacked or somebody's, you think your passwords got out, you can delete all those off your computer as well.
We talked about earlier, thank you, Rick, is these privacy policies and everything else. So Greg, on app permissions, I mean, this is kind of sort of the same thing, a different base of the same thing. Isn't it important when we decide to put an app on our computer or on our phone, or our kids do, that we see what it is that they're doing? What are they collecting? Check the permissions. And remember, everything's already automatic. If you want to start to shut it down, you've really got to read those permissions, right? And go through it. Can you speak to that for just a minute?
Sure. I mean, I just rhetorically raised the question, how many people have downloaded the flashlight function onto their phone? And when you try to do it, it says, may we access your contacts? Do you wonder why does a flashlight need to access your contacts?
Exactly.
That's why the app exists, because it wants to get into your phone. And so it's a pain. It's unfortunate. But that's the digital world, is we have to be so alert to everything that we download. Onto our devices. And so, like I said, I have an 18-year-old, just the last 18 years, watch him grow up dealing with his phone and dealing with these apps. And we just had a lot of communication about what to download and what not to download, how to look out for things that might not be good, and ones that he can do. But there's only it just takes a lot of energy as a consumer now to protect yourself, and you have to be fully alert. When you see crazy things like, may we access your contacts? Well, that's not necessary for a flashlight, so just don't do it.
Yeah, it's probably just good to, I think it was Nancy Reagan that said, just say no. No is probably a good word. here for all this no, 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 no. So, like, ask yourself the question, why do you need to access my contacts? The answer is no, no, no. One of the other safety tips is consider deleting a lot of the apps on your phone. So in preparing for this last night, I was up till midnight deleting probably 25 apps that somehow got on my phone. Probably some I downloaded at some point when I thought I was going to need them when I was climbing a mountain in Maine last year. I don't need that one anymore. So I just was going delete, 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 delete. Smart move or too much trouble?
No, I think it's a great move to get rid of as many apps as you can that you're not using. Rule of thumb, if it's a free app, it's not free. It's collecting your data because there's nothing that's free out there. And so I think that in of itself can be misleading and maybe something that you could have, the Federal Trade Commission look at and say, well, it's not free if they're collecting your data. There is a cost to your privacy, and that cost should be detailed before you accept it of what information that they're collecting, and then have it as an opt-in and click through like your contact information, your biometrics, all the other things, your camera, all the other things that automatically get included when you hit I agree.
Great. Well, I think we've covered a lot of what parents need to be aware of. And I'm just going to say one thing really quickly about Clear at the airport. I thought, oh, well, this is so convenient because now the other line that's supposed to be really convenient is really not convenient anymore. So maybe I'll do Clear. But now they've got my eye print and everything. It's like, why am I doing this? Because it's convenient. It's like this immediate gratification thing. So I would just caution everybody, start to be thinking about the more you give away, the more these companies, and they share and they sell data, right? I mean, this is a whole business, right? This is their business model. But we're gonna be coming to the close of our show. So I really want to get to the most important thing is what can parents do to protect their kids, right? So I'm going to start with this. Teach your kids to guard their personal information. And quite frankly, they're prone, as we are, to sharing way too much information online, way too much when they're playing a game, way too much on social media. So anything that's personally identifiable that would put that child at a particular school, playing for a particular sports team, at a particular party, even in a particular neighborhood, can put them at risk for safety and for privacy violations. Right, Greg?
Yes. As a parent, because everybody who's been a parent thinks they're an expert now, right? Because we've been through one of the most difficult parts of life was raising a kid, also the most rewarding. But what I would say, and the rule we had in our household with my son growing up was it's so important to have an open communication.
Yes.
Parents need to instill trust in their kids and need to let their kids know that they can trust their parents and they don't have to hide from them. And that was kind of the rule of thumb of which we use. My son, he's a distance runner. And so he has a lot of apps that relate to distance running, like Strava, where he can post his workouts. And he can find workouts from runners all over the world. He follows runners all around the world they're posting their workouts and their races and all of that. But when he downloaded that app, we made it very clear that he didn't list our home address, that he listed an address out on a park a couple blocks away from our home, so that if somebody wanted to track him, they would never know exactly where his home was if they wanted to use that device. Even though it's a harmless app, very important app for an athlete, but still to have that communication to say, listen, just take a precaution here with that. But it's just so important. Nothing substitutes for either parent or teachers that have open discussions with children about what their online activity is, and they should feel free and comfortable to be able to talk about that and have an open dialogue. And that's probably the most important thing that can be done right now, is to make sure that somebody in that child's life needs to be communicating with them in an open, honest way, whether it's the parents or teachers or somebody, some adult.
Right, Greg, and on a regular basis, I always teach parents, if your kids are online every day, be having conversations with them every day and build that atmosphere of trust and be that trusted adult. And Rick, also turning on tools like the privacy tools, the parental control tools, use all this technology. These tools are available, but they're off right now. You have to turn them on, otherwise they're not going to work. Rick, 30 seconds on this and we're gonna be wrapping up here.
Sure. I think one of the most important things is for parents to realize that they don't have to be technology experts to teach their kids how to be safe online. You don't have to know how a car works in order to tell a child or to a teenager, don't drink and drive, right? So I think just common sense that what you're putting online is going to stay online,
Right.
and having them realize that it can have long-term ramifications.
That's right. We always say, be careful what you post online. Think before you post, and remember, there are no takebacks. That goes for us as adults and for our kids. So we would love for you to come and visit our website at internetsafety101.org. You can find out everything you need to know about any of these dangers, any of these risks. Today's issue was about privacy. Sign up for our free newsletter. And we are a 501c3, so you can support our work. And so finally, last word, Rick, Greg, how can people reach you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. So Rick Lane, just type me in LinkedIn and you'll be able to find a lot of my postings. And that's where I really communicate with the general public.
Thanks, Rick. Greg?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as well. And so I can be found that way as well. My email address is glr@e-copernicus.com. So I could, that probably the best way is to email me.
And you can also just go to internetsafety101.org because Greg is on our board.
Right.
And thanks everybody for joining us. Please share this podcast if you found it helpful. And until next time, remember to be kind, give grace, and show love. God bless y'all.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.